action and force. That's so much kinetic wordage. The little 3.5-inch plastic figures fired from the womb of Action Man and his featureless plastic groin. We are here to discuss them, their Spectrum game and their cartoon show. And what do we have here? Yes, two games based on the fully posable buggers, both seemingly made by people who had never seen Action Force before. But before we get to the video games, let's take a look at the source material. And bear with me, because this is quite a confusing one. So there were these two figures that were incredibly popular in the early 70s. Barbies for men, if you like, because they were essentially the same sort of thing, but instead of small dogs and like handbags and hand dryers, they had big old machine guns and tanks instead. They were called Action Man and G.I. Joe. They were by two separate companies, Palitoy and Hasbro. When sales abruptly halted due to the rise of Kenner's much more collectible, smaller and cheaper Star Wars figures, G.I. Joe makers Hasbro and Palitoy's Action Man went, shag it, let's just copy what they're doing, and shrunk G.I. Joseph and the Man of Action. But they did it independently at first. Action Force was infantry based with packs of faceless soldiers of different types, all personality free, save for a few key characters like the villainous Red Shadows and their leader Baron Ironblood. Along with a few memorable vehicles. I'm sure a lot of us will remember this giant machine gun covered flying skull. Yes. It did okay, but G.I. Joe was clearly the better option. They had better characters, better personality and better toys. So eventually a deal was done and Action Force basically abandoned their barely movable faceless squaddies and slapped their slogan on the G.I. Joe toys instead, and pretended that G.I. Joe characters like Flint and Lady J had a more British-based heritage than their American origins. And so, lo and behold, G.I. Joe became Action Force over here, and the toy-shifting cartoon series was tarted up with a new Action Forcey theme and a different logo. A filmation show running from 1983 to 1986 was followed by an animated movie, and G.I. Joe Action Force was a phenomenon, mainly in its native country across the pond, but it was mainly known in the UK for those early 2000 memes made by Chicago filmmaker Eric Fensler. You know the ones. They were the ones that basically remixed the animation from the PSAs at the end of each episode into a more surreal and adult equivalent. They were all very funny, pork chop sandwiches and all. Now moving on to the games, published by Virgin Games and released on the Spectrum, the Commodore 64 and the Amstrad in 1987. The first Action Force is actually a little bit different from its 8-bit counterparts. The Spectrum version unfortunately doesn't have a lot in the way of enemy craft, unlike its brethren, with the 48K version basically just having several ground-to-air missile emplacements and skybound mines to give you jip, and jip they will give thee. You are Mute Ninja and black leather wearing hard man and cool name Haver Snake Eyes, and you've tied a small helicopter to your back. In another major difference, you don't control Snake Eyes in the Amstrad and Commodore 64 versions. Instead, you get Wild Bill in his big old helicopter. I'll let you decide which is better there. I mean, Snake Eyes is cooler, but, you know, that helicopter looks a bit ridiculous. Your job is to clear a way for a small ATV called the Striker to traverse some terrain, because Chief Bastard Cobra Commander hates tiny little vehicles filled with soldiers because they run over his geraniums, his German shepherds and his pet Germain Greers. Yeah, none of that is true. Anyway, you do this by getting rid of the naughty boys, their toys, the walls, and by flying bridge parts over rivers so that the ATV can traverse ever closer to putting a medium-sized shell right up Cobra Commander's poop chute wrong'un. How does it play? Okay, I guess. Control is a bit skittish with the helicopter backpack not really having inertia as such, but it does have a certain tricksy handling that makes manoeuvring between the onslaught of explosives very difficult, which makes the game quite challenging, maybe not in a good way. The idea of protecting the ATV is kind of interesting, but it's not very well implemented. And while Snake Eyes is one of the most beloved G.I. Joe characters, it's a very wasted appearance, as this high-kicking double-hard sword-wielding ninja, Swinehund, is permanently strapped into his little helicopter, and there's nothing in the way of recognisable Cobra vehicles or soldiers either. Programmers Gang of Five, who also produced the sequel and the superb Dan Dare, are quality coders no doubt, but a bit more time spent with the source material could have borne more interesting fruit in my opinion. Magazine reviews, as seemingly bleeding ever with games of the era, are vastly differing in their opinion. CVG, in their combined review with the Commodore 64 version, fair blew their proverbial beans over Action Force, making it very hard to play the tape, awarding it a 10 out of 10, saying that the game had great presentation, nice sound effects, the works. Sinclair user were similarly pleased with the first Action Force game on the system, regaling the colourful action game with a 9 out of 10 and saying that the complex, fast-moving arcade action is going to take a long time to master and it's great fun to look at and play. Crash, though, they didn't have such kind words for G.I. Joseph's 8-bit carry-on, however, slamming the game. They said that Action Force comes as an unwelcome surprise from the Gang of Five, though the front end is very pleasant indeed. Unfortunately, the game itself lacks substance, and the jerky but colourful graphics do little to entice you into it. They scored Action Force with a lowly 35%. Your Sinclair played it a bit cooler with Action Force's debut on the rubber-keyed Chum, complaining about a lack of originality and awarding it a 6 out of 10, which, you know what, to me seems about right. Action Force 2, though, now that's a different prospect. The first thing you'll no doubt notice about Action Force 2, as everyone does, is the music. It's not that it's bad. Oh no, it's brilliant. It's just hugely out of place. It's unmistakably a very decent 128k rendition of Duran Duran's A View to a Kill, the eponymous pop song from the Bond movie of the same name. It suits the gameplay, no doubt, but it adds further fuel to the argument that Virgin's Gang of Five spent about 30 seconds looking at the Argos catalogue toy page as research for Action Force and G.I. Joe's games. Every G.I. Joe fan remembers Terry, right? You know, Terry, the guy who chucks 10-ton weights out of windows. You know, that character. Everyone had that toy, didn't they? They didn't because it didn't exist. The plotline is that Cobra, those international terrorist buggers, have kidnapped a load of citizens, and it's up to the two-man operation of Quick Kick and Sniper Airtight to rescue them. Looking at the screenshots, you'd be forgiven for thinking you control Quick Kick, running about kicking Cobra operatives in the chops and testicle areas. But no, you do not. In fact, I think Quick Kick might have a bit of a jippy tum, as he seems reluctant to lift his leg even a little bit to deliver one of his self-proclaimed quick kicks. Instead, he just sort of jogs along, climbing up the occasional ladder. You see, you aren't playing as Quick Kick. You are the other Joe in the team. You're off screen. You are Airtight. Your job is to snipe the obstacles and wrong-uns out of the way, and it's bloody good. The gameplay is pure trial and error. You'll have to memorise where nasties are going to appear, and you'll do that from your previous playthrough. You basically have to set out a sequence in your head from your previous playthroughs to stand a chance of taking out all the dangers on every screen. It sounds frustrating, but actually it's really fun, and it turns the game into a terrific challenge, almost like a memory puzzle. I really enjoyed it, and when I finish this series and compile them into order of quality, I suspect that Action Force 2 might be a very strong contender for a top 10 slot. Not bad at all. I never played it before today. Graphics and presentation are brilliantly done too, with the little red sniper scope at the bottom of the screen accurately relaying all the action from the main screen itself. Oh, it's not at all useful, but it looks really cool, and sometimes that is all I need. A weird feature is how you replenish the health of our militaristic pair. There's an energy bar that depletes throughout their adventure, no doubt something to do with Quick Kick's stomach flu. This is replenished by shooting the many American flags that dot the landscape. I'm sure that this will get some of the more patriotic types on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean crying into their MAGA hats. They love guns and the stars and stripes, but don't let them copulate, for Christ's sakes. So, Action Force 2 then, a very nice surprise for me. Magazines loved it too, with high accolades being awarded by Crash, Sinclair User and Your Sinclair. Crash gave it a 90%, offering that Action Force 2 is a brilliant and action-packed game, and you should buy it today. I don't know how you're going to buy it today anymore. You could go on eBay, I suppose. Your Sinclair didn't hold back either, giving it a 9 out of 10, with the declaration that strategic carnage was matched by snazzy programming and natty graphics. Sinclair User just flat out gave Action Force 2 a straight 10 out of 10 and lauded it as being an amazingly good game license, which combines originality with graphic sophistication. And there you go then. What a cracker Action Force 2 turned out to be. Action Force 1, it was alright. And well, what a cracking week with G.I. Joe I've had after winning the Retrotech 120p challenge playing the arcade adaptation of G.I. Joe. So it's been some week with Joe. Yo Joe indeed. Just call me G.I. J. Okay, thanks, bye.